My mom sold me for cheaper than a used Xbox, so I showed her exactly what kind of games I could play. I was 9 years old when I learned how to change adult diapers, because my grandma, who lived with us, had wandered out of the house again and soiled herself in the neighbor's garden, convinced she was late for her job at a factory that closed 30 years ago. "Where's mommy?" was the first thing grandma asked when I brought her back inside. I told her mom was at work, even though she was locked in her bedroom, coming down from whatever she'd injected the night before during her manic episode. Grandma was 73 years older than me, but it felt like I was the adult, because I was the one who remembered to give her medications, who redirected her when she tried to cook with the iron, who sang her the same lullabies every night when she cried for her own mother. And whenever our mom was either too high or too low to function, which was 95% of the time, I kept grandma safe by hiding the knives and unplugging the stove. I was 12 when I started stealing groceries, because I was making more money than my mom. Her only income was selling our food stamps for darg money. And when I came home with a jar of peanut butter I'd shoved under my jacket at the corner store, she grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the kitchen counter. Once, twice, 3 times, until I saw stars. "You think you're better than me, stealing like some common criminal when I'm out here trying to get us by." I stared at her dilated pupils. This was the first real food I'd brought home in weeks, because we'd been living on expired canned goods from the church pantry. And just when I tried to steady myself against the wall, she continued, "Get the hell out! I don't need a thief for a daughter." My mind instantly went to grandma, and when I heard her humming in the living room, completely oblivious, I knew I couldn't leave her alone with mom in this state. So I pretended to pack my things, then hid in the basement until mom's rage turned into the inevitable crash. But that night, something worse happened. Mom's bipolar swings had been getting more extreme, and during her next manic episode, she decided grandma was a government spy. I woke up to screaming and found mom trying to tie grandma to a kitchen chair with extension cords, accusing her of transmitting signals through her dentures. Grandma was terrified, crying like a child, calling for her husband who'd been dead for 15 years. That's when I made the call. I was still 12 years old, sitting in a police station at 3 a.m. when a social worker arrived. It was a woman with tired eyes but a gentle voice. "Tell me about your home," she said simply. I looked her right in the eyes and told her everything. The substances, the mood swings, grandma's dementia, how I'd been forging mom's signature on grandma's social security checks just to keep the lights on. We ended up talking for hours, and she made sure grandma was taken to a secure memory care facility that night. The next part happened fast. When they searched our house, they found mom's stash hidden in grandma's old medication bottles. Mom was arrested, and I was placed in emergency foster care. The family was decent enough, they didn't make me work like a slave, and they let me visit grandma every Sunday at the facility. But they made it clear from day one that they were only keeping me temporarily. Lucky for them, another family wanted to foster me after 6 months. This couple specialized in kids who'd been caregivers. They understood why I woke up at 2 a.m. to do bed checks, and why I hid food in my room. They helped me through the panic attacks and the guilt. They even adopted me when I turned 15. The adoption process was shockingly easy. Our mom didn't even show up to court. She signed away her rights for $100. The foster family offered it just to make things smooth, and she took it without a second thought. Didn't even ask how I was doing. Update: I'm now 17 and have spent my entire life working and studying. I have around $2,000 in my bank account. My adoptive parents have been good to me, and I volunteer at grandma's memory care facility 3 times a week. She rarely recognizes me anymore, but sometimes she thinks I'm her sister and tells me stories about their childhood. Everything was going well until 6 months ago. My mom managed to track down what school I was attending, and I saw her waiting outside when school ended. She looked thin, hollow-eyed, but sober. I always figured she'd make her come back in one way or another, so I just asked her what she wanted. "You owe me," she said with a straight face. "You took everything from me." But I wasn't the same kid she slammed into a counter anymore. I was almost an adult, so I told her to fuck off and just walked home. But that evening when I got back from visiting grandma at the memory care facility, my adoptive mom met me at the door with a strange expression. "There's someone here to see you," she said carefully. I walked into the living room, and there was my birth mother, sitting on our couch with a cup of tea. But that wasn't the worst part. Next to her sat grandma, still in her facility clothes, looking confused and frightened. My birth mother smiled that manic smile I knew too well. "I checked her out for a family visit," she said sweetly. "After all, I'm still her daughter, and you owe it to me to give us another chance." My adoptive mom, Karen's hand gripped my shoulder protectively, while my birth mother Janet kept that manic smile plastered across her face. Grandma rocked slightly in her confusion, clutching her purse and asking nobody in particular where it had gone, even though it sat right in her lap. My fingers flew across my phone screen, texting Emma. 911, she took grandma. I noticed the facility bracelet still dangling from grandma's thin wrist. At least they'd know where to look for her. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "You have no right to be here." But Janet pulled grandma closer, her arm wrapping around the confused elderly woman's shoulders. "Mom missed you so much, didn't you, Mom?" Janet cooed, while grandma's eyes darted between us, searching for something familiar in faces she couldn't quite place. I caught the slight tremor in Janet's hand despite her confident voice, the same tell she'd always had when her manic episodes were peaking. Karen cleared her throat, using her calmest social worker voice. "Why don't we all sit down and talk about this calmly?" But Janet's facade cracked instantly. "I don't need permission to visit my own mother," she snapped, just as Marcus appeared from the kitchen, already pressing his phone to his ear, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. My phone buzzed. Emma's response made my heart race. "Memory care just called my mom. She works there. They're freaking out, sending someone." Another notification popped up showing Emma's mom was calling the facility repeatedly. Help was coming, but how long would it take? I had a choice to make. Call 911 immediately and risk escalating the situation, or try to de-escalate until facility staff arrived. The problem was, I knew grandma. When she got frightened, she could become violent. I'd seen her punch an aide who'd startled her during a bath. I noticed her starting to pull at her clothes, an early sign of agitation I'd learned to recognize years ago. Choosing de-escalation, I moved slowly to sit near grandma, keeping my voice soft and steady. "Hey grandma, remember that show you like? The one with the dancing?" But Janet jerked grandma away from me, nearly causing the elderly woman to stumble. "We don't need you anymore," Janet hissed, her grip tightening on grandma's arm. Through the living room window, I spotted Janet's hit-up Honda parked crookedly in our driveway. The back seat was packed with garbage bags, and I could make out what looked like a child's toy among the mess. She'd been living in her car. Of course she had. Marcus ended his call and caught Karen's eye, mouthing 10 minutes while holding up both hands. But Janet noticed the exchange. She started edging toward the door, pulling grandma with her. That's when I spotted her car keys already clutched in her free hand. She'd been planning this escape route from the moment she'd walked in. Janet fumbled with her phone one-handed, texting rapidly while still maintaining her grip on grandma. My own phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Such a beautiful family you have now." The words made my skin crawl. She'd been watching us. For how long? Another text came through, this time from Emma's mom. mom directly. Janet's been signing Grandma out as authorized visitor. Staff assumed you knew since she's listed as daughter. My stomach dropped. How many times had she visited? What had she been doing? Emma, bless her, was already on it. She sent a photo she'd managed to snap of the visitor log at the front desk while visiting her mom at work. Janet's signature appeared multiple times over the past 3 weeks, but it was the notation next to each signature that made my blood boil. Daughter and caregiver. Suddenly, Grandma's confused expression shifted. She reached out toward me, her voice small and lost. Sister, I want to go home. It was what she always called me during her lucid moments, thinking I was her long-dead sister. Janet's face twisted from fake sweetness to real anger as her grip on Grandma tightened visibly. Karen tried again to defuse the situation. Janet, I understand you want to see your mother, but Mom listed me as emergency contact last month. Janet interrupted, her voice triumphant. Check with the facility if you don't believe me. Karen faltered, confusion crossing her face. How is that possible? My phone screen lit up with missed call notifications, 3 weeks worth from unknown numbers, all matching the timestamps of Janet's visits to Grandma. The voicemails were all under 3 seconds long. She'd been trying to reach out, or more likely, trying to gauge if I knew about her visits. Janet turned to Grandma, her voice taking on a manipulative sweetness. Remember how they took you away from me? But I found you again, didn't I? Marcus stepped strategically between them and the door, his large frame blocking the exit while he assured us that facility staff were almost here. Karen's phone rang, the principal's name flashing on the screen. She stepped aside to answer, but I could hear fragments. Unstable mother, approaching students, asking about schedule. My safety at school had already been compromised. The memory care director arrived, but her words crushed my hope. Mizzy Chen has visitation rights as next of kin. Our lawyers say we can't restrict her. She avoided eye contact as I protested that Janet had lost custody, signed away her rights. There was something off about the director's demeanor, like she knew this was wrong, but couldn't do anything about it. I made a mental note to check Grandma's room at the facility tomorrow. If Janet had been visiting for weeks, she might have taken things, or worse, planted something. The thought made me sick. Janet fumbled in her oversized purse, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled out facility paperwork. She waved it like a victory flag, showing she was indeed listed as an authorized visitor. The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. The facility had allowed this without ever notifying me. Emma burst through the door with her mom, both slightly out of breath. Emma's mom, still in her facility scrubs, confirmed what I'd feared. She's been charming the staff for weeks, bringing flowers, treats for your grandma. She seemed completely stable. Her expression darkened. One of the aides even mentioned thinking you'd been exaggerating about the past. That's when I noticed it. A small chip on Janet's keychain catching the light. A sobriety chip. 30 days was embossed on its surface. 30 days clean, and here she was, in what I recognized as another manic phase disguised as recovery. The pattern was so familiar it made my chest tight. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but when I opened it, I saw it was from Rosario, the evening shift aide at the facility. I never trusted her. She asks too many questions about you. Finally, someone who saw through Janet's act. Karen found the legal guardian paperwork in her filing cabinet, but Janet was ready with a counter. I never lost rights to my mother, just to her, she said, pointing at me with disdain. Check the court records. It was true. The custody case had only been about me. Grandma's rights had never been formally addressed, creating a legal gray area I hadn't known existed. Karen fingered the business card of our adoption lawyer, probably already planning the call she'd need to make. Marcus hadn't moved from his position blocking the door. When Janet tried to push past him with Grandma, he stood firm. Grandma was getting more agitated by the second, pulling at her hair. Another warning sign that she was about to have an episode. Another text from Rosario changed everything. Check security footage 3:47 p.m. last Tuesday. She went through your grandma's dresser drawers. The first crack in Janet's perfect visitor facade. Evidence. Janet posted the old photo on Facebook while still in our living room, her fingers moving across her phone screen with practiced ease. I watched her tag my school friends. The notification sounds pinging on my own device as each tag went through. The caption made my blood run cold as I read it over her shoulder. My friends started texting immediately, confused questions flooding my messages about why my birth mom was suddenly reaching out to them. I recognized the manipulation instantly. This was exactly what she'd done to my father before he'd disappeared from our lives, creating doubt, making people question my version of events, isolating me from my support system. The familiar pattern made my hands shake as I screenshot the post before she could delete it later. Maintenance worker Tom had been texting Rosario about Janet's behavior at the facility. Rosario forwarded the messages to me, revealing how Janet had been sweet-talking various staff members, asking about security protocols and trying to get gate codes. The pattern of manipulation extended far beyond what I'd initially realized. Emma's younger sister approached me at school the next morning, holding a $20 bill. She explained that Janet had approached her outside the middle school, offering money to deliver a letter to me. Smart kid had told her mom instead of taking the bait. Through the classroom window, I could see Janet's Honda in the visitor parking lot, and there in the passenger seat was an envelope, presumably the undelivered letter. I spent my lunch period documenting everything, creating a digital folder of evidence. The Facebook post, the text messages, the visitor logs Emma had photographed. Each piece painted a picture of calculated manipulation that went far beyond a simple desire to reconnect. The police arrived at our house that afternoon after the facility called them about the unauthorized removal of a memory care resident. The officers listened to our explanation, reviewed the paperwork Janet proudly displayed, then shrugged. Since Janet had visitation rights and Grandma wasn't in immediate physical danger, they classified it as a civil matter. They left without taking any action, leaving us to handle the situation ourselves. Rosario's next message was troubling. Other staff members were starting to buy into Janet's stories about me being a troubled teen who had abandoned my grandmother. The break room gossip was getting ugly, with some employees questioning why a 17-year-old had guardianship in the first place. Janet's poison was spreading through the facility. That evening at dinner, Karen and Marcus laid out several legal texts on grandparent rights. They'd spent the afternoon researching, and their findings were encouraging. My documented history as Grandma's primary caregiver, combined with Janet's abandonment and criminal record, gave me a strong legal position. Marcus had already contacted 3 family law attorneys for consultations. The phone rang during dessert. Karen answered, her face growing pale as she listened. She handed me the phone. It was Diane, Janet's former sponsor. Her words came out in a rush. Janet had stopped taking her bipolar medication weeks ago, not just the addiction recovery substances. The manic episode I'd suspected was confirmed, and likely escalating. I decided to fight Janet's narrative with truth. That night, I posted my own family photos on social media, images of me with Karen, Marcus, and Grandma during our weekly visits. My caption simply stated the facts about our journey together. Within minutes, supportive comments poured in from real friends who knew our story. Janet's fake account appeared in the comments almost immediately, spewing vitriol that only proved my point about her instability. The next morning's doctor appointment for Grandma became a battleground. Whoever took her would would control her medical decisions going forward, and we all knew it. I arrived at the facility at dawn, but Janet was already there, trying to convince the staff to release Grandma for a routine checkup. Rosario stalled brilliantly, citing paperwork requirements and protocol delays. Diane met me at a coffee shop near the facility that afternoon. She looked exhausted as she revealed the full scope of Janet's recent activities. 3 other families had fallen for Janet's manipulation in the past month. She'd been couch surfing and extracting money from anyone who'd listened to her victim narrative. This custody grab was just the latest in a series of increasingly desperate schemes. I returned to find Janet arguing with facility staff, her carefully maintained mask finally slipping. Her voice had risen to near shouting as she demanded immediate access to Grandma. Other residents' families were starting to notice, exchanging worried glances and steering clear of the confrontation. Janet cornered me in the hallway, making her offer in a low, urgent voice. She wanted shared custody of Grandma. If I agreed, she'd leave my adoptive family alone. The threat was clear. She'd researched everyone I cared about, mapped out pressure points. The calculation in her eyes reminded me why I'd been so relieved when she'd signed away her rights. One of the other grandmothers, Mrs. Patterson, pulled her daughter aside after witnessing Janet's aggressive behavior. I overheard her whispered concern about that angry woman who keeps yelling at the staff. The community was starting to see through Janet's facade without any help from me. I discovered the financial theft by accident. While helping Rosario organize the activity room, I found bank statements tucked inside magazines Janet had donated to the facility. The statements were Grandma's, and they showed $15,000 in withdrawals over the past month. Money that should have been in Grandma's account for her care was gone. The bank confirmed my worst fears. Janet had added herself as an authorized user on Grandma's account 3 weeks ago. They had signature cards showing Grandma's shaky signature, though the security footage would later reveal Janet guiding Grandma's hand while she was clearly confused. Only $30,000 of Grandma's original $45,000 nest egg remained. Rosario pulled me aside with the visitor log, pointing out a pattern I'd missed. Janet had exclusively signed Grandma out during my school hours, carefully avoiding any chance of running into me. The calculated avoidance proved this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about access and control. Emma skipped her AP chemistry class to attend an emergency family meeting at my house. She arrived with a color-coded folder of evidence she'd been compiling since this started. Her organizational skills put my haphazard screenshots to shame. Karen and Marcus reviewed everything with growing determination. Janet's threats to expose our perfect family facade fell flat when Marcus calmly responded that we had nothing to hide. Karen added that transparency would only help our case. Their unified support made my chest tight with gratitude. They were choosing to stand with me despite the mess Janet was creating. I had an opportunity to access Janet's medical records through the facility's system during my volunteer shift. The temptation was strong. Confirmation of her diagnosis and medication non-compliance would strengthen our case. But I closed the laptop without looking. We'd win this the right way, without stooping to her level. The confrontation at the facility drew a crowd. Janet's admission that she'd been clean for 37 days came out during her heated argument with the director. I pointed out that sobriety meant more than just being off substances. It meant taking all prescribed medications and maintaining mental stability. Several family members recorded the exchange on their phones. The bank security footage was damning. It clearly showed Grandma in a confused state while Janet guided her hand to sign paperwork. The bank manager confirmed this constituted elder abuse and immediately froze the account pending investigation. We finally had concrete evidence of financial exploitation. 2 facility staff members submitted resignations rather than get involved in the escalating situation, but 3 others approached me privately, pledging to document any concerning behavior they witnessed. The divide in staff opinion was creating tension, but truth was slowly winning. My honesty about the situation began resonating with other families at the facility. During a family council meeting, several people shared their own uncomfortable encounters with Janet. An informal support network began forming, with families exchanging phone numbers and promising to watch out for each other's loved ones. The school counselor called me in after several teachers reported my obvious distress. She offered resources and support, connecting me with a social worker who specialized in family trauma. The school was creating a safety plan without my even asking. Janet's escalation took a disturbing turn when she followed my bus route. She boarded at the stop after mine, sitting directly behind me for 3 stops. Her whispered demands for a private conversation made my skin crawl. The bus driver noticed my discomfort and radioed for security at the next stop. 3 families formally complained to the facility's board about Janet's disruptive presence. Another granddaughter started a petition requesting enhanced security measures. The mounting pressure gave the director ammunition to restrict Janet's access to supervised visits only. Diane revealed the final piece of Janet's pattern during another meeting. Court records from Nevada showed Janet had lost custody of another child 8 years ago under similar circumstances. The pattern was clear. When desperate for money, Janet would attempt to regain custody of family members who had access to funds. I maintained Grandma's routine throughout the chaos, visiting with her favorite butterscotch candies and playing the old jazz music she loved. The staff noticed Grandma was notably calmer during my visits than Janet's. Her agitation levels were documented in her care notes, creating an official record of who provided better emotional support. 5 facility staff members began actively documenting Janet's behavior in incident reports. The paper trail grew daily. Each witnessed outburst or aggressive interaction officially recorded. The documentation would prove crucial for legal proceedings. Janet's attempt to have me banned from the facility backfired spectacularly. The director saw through the manipulation immediately, especially when Janet couldn't provide any concrete reasons beyond vague accusations of interference. If anything, it strengthened my position as the responsible party. Mr. Chen, a board member visiting his own mother, witnessed Janet berating me in the hallway. He intervened with quiet authority, later pulling me aside to share his own daughter's similar experience with an exploitative relative. He promised to bring the matter to the board's attention. The social consequences began mounting. Other families greeted me warmly while obviously avoiding Janet. She found herself isolated during visiting hours, her aggressive energy creating a bubble of empty space around her. Natural consequences were sometimes the most effective. Credit card records revealed Janet had used Grandma's card at a casino the previous month. The financial elder abuse evidence was mounting beyond just the bank withdrawals. Each transaction painted a picture of exploitation that would be hard to defend in court. Tomorrow's care plan meeting would determine Grandma's immediate placement. Janet had been coaching Grandma on what to say, but dementia made retention impossible. I overheard Janet's frustration when Grandma couldn't remember the rehearsed answers during a practice session in the garden. Janet's true nature revealed itself completely when she snapped at Grandma for the memory lapses. Her harsh tone and aggressive gestures were witnessed by a social worker who'd arrived early for the meeting. The mask had finally slipped at the worst possible moment for Janet's case. The truth became crystal clear during a quiet moment with Grandma. This wasn't about family or reconciliation or making amends. It was about the remaining $30,000 and the monthly social security checks. Janet had done the math and decided Grandma was worth exploiting. During the care plan meeting, I presented a detailed timeline of Janet's absences throughout Grandma's Grandma's life. Medical records, school documents, and social service reports created an undeniable pattern. Janet sat silent, unable to refute documented facts that showed years of neglect and abandonment. The facility administrator and 2 board members voted to maintain the current arrangement with additional protections against financial exploitation. Janet's carefully constructed image crumbled as she stormed out, shouting threats about legal action she couldn't afford. In a moment of rare clarity, Grandma looked directly at Janet and asked why that angry woman was there. The entire room heard it. The genuine confusion and discomfort in Grandma's voice proved more powerful than any legal argument about her best interests. Janet's text arrived that evening, a photo of a legal filing for grandparent rights, claiming I was an unfit guardian. The document was full of legal-sounding language designed to intimidate. Karen's lawyer friend reviewed it within an hour, confirming it was mostly bluffs with no real legal standing. Adult Protective Services opened an investigation based on the facility's formal report of financial exploitation. Janet didn't know yet, but the wheels of justice were beginning to turn. The investigation would examine not just the recent theft, but the pattern of exploitation. My support network had solidified beyond anything I could have imagined. Emma's family, the school counselor, facility staff, and other families were all prepared to provide statements if needed. The community protection that had activated around Grandma and me was overwhelming in the best way. 7 families from the facility offered to testify about Janet's concerning behavior if the case went to court. Their witnessed accounts of aggression, manipulation, and disruption would create a powerful narrative about who truly had Grandma's best interests at heart. I compiled everything into a comprehensive evidence folder. Dates, times, witnesses, documentation, all organized chronologically. Emma created digital backups stored in multiple locations. We were ready for whatever legal battle Janet might bring. The bank's fraud department contacted me about the suspicious activity on Grandma's account. They had already restricted access pending investigation, and their findings would be forwarded to Adult Protective Services. The financial crimes were being taken seriously by institutions with real power. Diane arrived at the facility the next morning to meet with the social worker investigating Janet's financial exploitation. She brought years of documentation showing Janet's pattern of targeting vulnerable family members during manic episodes. The social worker took extensive notes as Diane explained how Janet had systematically drained her own mother's savings before moving on to other relatives. My evidence folder had grown to over 200 pages. Bank records, visitor logs, witness statements, and screenshots created an undeniable timeline of exploitation. The social worker's expression grew grimmer with each document she reviewed, occasionally asking for clarification on specific dates and amounts. The pharmacy records proved devastating to Janet's claims of being Grandma's caregiver. Not once in the past 5 years had Janet picked up medications, signed for prescriptions, or even been listed as an authorized representative. The pharmacist provided sworn statements confirming I'd been the sole person managing Grandma's complex medication regimen since I was 12 years old. The facility board held an emergency vote that afternoon. Based on the documented pattern of disruption, financial exploitation, and aggressive behavior towards staff and families, they unanimously banned Janet from the premises pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Security was instructed to call police if she attempted entry. I was reviewing chemistry notes in the school library when my phone lit up with a photo from an unknown number. Janet sat in her Honda in the school parking lot, holding birthday balloons and a cake, though my birthday was 3 months away. The security guard was already approaching her vehicle in the background of the image. The soft lockdown announcement came over the intercom 5 minutes later. Teachers locked classroom doors while I was escorted to the main office. Through the window, I watched 2 police officers speaking with Janet, who gestured wildly while pointing at the school building. The cake ended up smeared across her windshield during her increasingly agitated movements. Janet's Instagram livestream started while I sat in the principal's office. Several classmates watched on their phones before the school's Wi-Fi blocked social media access. She ranted about being kept from her daughter, conveniently omitting that she'd signed away parental rights years ago. The comment section filled with confused reactions from people who didn't know our history. The whispers started during 6th period. Fragments of Janet's livestream had spread through screenshot chains before the Wi-Fi block. I caught sideways glances and hushed conversations that stopped when I walked past. My chemistry partner awkwardly asked if I was okay, clearly unsure what to believe. Marcus and Karen were both at work and couldn't leave immediately. I sat alone in the cafeteria after school, watching classmates pretend not to stare. The weight of Janet's false narrative pressed against my chest until I pulled out my phone and opened our class group chat. I typed steadily for 10 minutes, laying out the truth, the abuse, the abandonment, the years of caring for Grandma alone, the recent financial exploitation. I attached photos from my evidence folder, the pharmacy records, the bank statements, the facility's incident reports. Then I hit send and waited. The response was immediate and unexpected. Classmate after classmate shared their own stories of difficult family members, custody battles, and relatives who only appeared when money was involved. 3 people I'd never spoken to privately messaged offering support. Janet's victim narrative crumbled against the weight of shared experiences and documented truth. The emergency meeting at the facility brought everyone together the next evening. Janet arrived flanked by 2 people I didn't recognize, likely new victims she'd convinced to support her. I sat between Karen and Marcus while Emma's family filled the row behind us. The facility administrator, social workers, and board members took their positions at the front table. Through the window, I could see Grandma in the activity room, peacefully working on a puzzle with an aide, blissfully unaware of the battle being fought over her. Janet's carefully constructed lies began unraveling within minutes. The timeline I'd created proved she'd only reappeared after reading an obituary for Grandma's friend that mentioned the trust fund established by Grandma's late husband. Janet tried to deny it, but her face revealed the truth when I produced a screenshot of her Facebook search history, legally obtained during the investigation. The facility's lawyer arrived with a thick folder. Based on the documented harassment, financial exploitation, and pattern of disruption, they were prepared to pursue a restraining order. Janet was served on the spot, her hands shaking as she read through the legal documents that would bar her from any contact with Grandma or the facility. The Adult Protective Services investigator presented 2 options. I could pursue civil remedies and let Janet walk away if she relinquished all claims to Grandma, or I could support criminal prosecution for elder abuse. I thought about all the other vulnerable elderly people Janet might target next. The decision was immediate and firm: prosecution. Janet's confident facade finally cracked completely when the detective explained she was facing potential jail time, not just family court disputes. This wasn't about custody anymore. It was about financial crimes against a vulnerable adult. Her 2 supporters quietly slipped out of the room as the reality of criminal charges sank in. In a last desperate manipulation, Janet threatened to harm herself if I didn't drop the charges. The social worker immediately activated crisis protocols. Within minutes, a professional crisis intervention team arrived to evaluate Janet. Her attempt to weaponize mental health health was blocked by trained professionals who recognized manipulation tactics. The crisis team's response was swift and thorough. They determined Janet needed immediate psychiatric evaluation and transported her to the hospital for a mandatory hold. Her threats couldn't be used against me when proper mental health protocols were followed. The system protected both of us from her manipulation. The legal proceedings moved quickly after that. With Janet hospitalized, her court-appointed attorney negotiated on her behalf. The evidence was overwhelming: financial exploitation, elder abuse, harassment. The permanent guardianship papers were signed by a judge who commended my years of dedicated caregiving. Janet accepted a plea deal 3 weeks later: 2 years probation, mandatory mental health treatment, and a permanent no-contact order protecting Grandma, me, and my adoptive family. She avoided jail time but faced real consequences. The criminal record would follow her to any state she might flee to. The remaining funds from Grandma's account were transferred to a protected trust with Marcus, Karen, and me as co-trustees. Every expenditure required documentation and approval, protecting Grandma's resources from any future exploitation attempts. The bank added additional security measures, flagging any suspicious access attempts. Life gradually returned to its rhythm: school, volunteering, family dinners. The evidence folder remained backed up in multiple locations, just in case. Emma and her family became even closer to us through the ordeal. Other families at the facility checked in regularly, our shared experience creating lasting bonds. Diane reported 6 months later that Janet had moved to Arizona, supposedly staying with a distant cousin. The pattern would likely repeat, but now there was a documented history following her. Other potential victims might be protected by the paper trail we'd created. On Grandma's 90th birthday, the facility's activity room filled with people who'd become our chosen family. Emma helped serve cake while her mother chatted with Karen. Marcus took photos as other residents and their families joined the celebration. Grandma sat in her favorite chair, humming along to the jazz music, occasionally calling me sister. I held her hand and whispered that she was safe, that I'd always protect her. She smiled and squeezed back, lost in a happy memory from decades past. The aide mentioned Grandma had been especially peaceful lately, no longer agitated by confusing visitors. Surrounded by the people who truly loved her, who'd fought to protect her, Grandma was finally free from exploitation and fear. The battles we'd fought were worth this moment of pure peace.